Hi, this is Eric Hansen, and today I'm here at BlogPotomac with Shel Holtz, who presented earlier this morning on cultural transformation and its role within organizations these days as it applies to the social space and social media. Just a few quick questions for you today, Shel. You talked about employees and frontline staff being more trusted than CEOs according to the Edelman Trust Barometer. What are you seeing from organizations right now, and how are they building momentum internally to engage those people to speak on the company's behalf?
Well, first of all, it's sad that it's really the exception rather than the rule that organizations are taking action to prepare their employees and encourage them to represent the organization. I should probably qualify that. They're not actually representing the organization because they're not authoritative spokespeople. And this is why a lot of policies say that, for example, on a blog comment field, you should always enter some text that says, I'm speaking for myself. But this is what employees do when they go to PTA meetings and church picnics, is they speak for themselves, but understanding the story that the company's trying to tell, or defending the company's reputation, or promoting the great products that the company makes. The companies that understand that their employees are, in fact, the front line of public relations are developing policies that is essentially pre-vetting legally. So rather than writing the copy and sending it to the lawyers to approve, the lawyers feel confident that employees who have read the policy and maybe been through the training aren't going to say anything to get the company in trouble. And beyond that, please go out there and be advocates for the organization or for the brand. So it's really a matter of policy, communicating it effectively, a policy that encourages rather than discourages participation, and it's also a matter of, in some organizations, training.
Right. Okay. Secondly, while there's a lot of people probably in this room that work for more traditionally conservative or highly regulated industries, me being one of them working in the healthcare field, how do you see those organizations transforming their culture? Because that's going to be more difficult than a more an organization that's open to change. I mean, obviously, you talked about the fact that leadership buy-in is important, but what are some of the other criteria that are important for these organizations to facilitate that change?
Well, it begins with recognizing that it's not an option. And I don't know if you're familiar with Ed Bennett's blog. It's called Found in Cash, where he maintains a list of hospitals and how they're engaging in social media, and it's a very rapidly growing list.
Right.
We see organizations that traditionally have not been anxious to engage in conversation because they're highly criticized and in fact often reviled. You look at Monsanto, for example, has come to the conclusion that the only way they're going to influence what people think is to participate in the conversations people are having around, in Monsanto's case, the issue of genetically modified food. So it starts with that understanding that influence accrues through conversation these days. Then, culturally, the only way you're ever going to change a culture is to shift the rewards and recognition to reinforce the behaviors that you're looking to get from people. So, in organizations where knowledge is closely held, you have to stop rewarding people who hold knowledge and start rewarding and recognizing people who share knowledge. It's the same thing here. You have to start shining the light on employees who are having conversations out there on behalf of the organization, and really spotlighting the fact that you have employees who are participating with discretionary effort on their own time, right, to go out and help the company tell its story. So reward and recognition is absolutely critical. And another thing that is absolutely critical is providing access. The companies that block access to Facebook and Twitter and social channels are keeping their employees from going out and telling the company's story.
Right.
They're preventing employees from representing the organization to the communities in which they participate. And to my way of thinking, that's just counterproductive.
Finally, you made a really interesting statement in front of the group earlier this morning that you think every company should have a blog.
Yeah.
And I think, that raised some eyebrows in the room, but tell me more about your thinking behind that comment.
Well, until I came to this conclusion about 6 months ago, I was with everybody else and said you shouldn't have a blog unless you have a strategic reason to have a blog. Well, the conclusion I've come to is that every organization shares the same strategic reason to have a blog, and that reason is that you need to be able to respond authoritatively but quickly in a crisis, or when an issue arises that if you don't react quickly will become a crisis. The example I gave this morning was United Airlines when Bloomberg issued a story that was actually 4 years old. It was in its database. Just some technical glitch, but crossing the wires all of a sudden was the announcement that United Airlines had filed bankruptcy. And it took them a day to get a press release out to deny that story. And in the interim, their share price dropped. I think it was in the 70–75% range. If they had been able to go onto the blog and say, look, everybody, we haven't filed bankruptcy. This is a 4-year-old story. We don't know what happened at Bloomberg. We're trying to get to the bottom of it. We'll be out with our official statement later. But please understand, we have not filed bankruptcy. They probably would have suffered no decline in share price at all. It's a mechanism that allows you to respond quickly. Now, what kind of blog you have requires that same strategic thinking that we talked about before. I mean, does it make sense to have a CEO blog? Does it make sense to have a group blog that addresses the culture of the organization?
Right.
Southwest Airlines has a group blog. It's culturally focused, but on the 4 or 5 instances where they have had crises, the chairman or the CEO and the president have been able to jump in, write byline posts that says, here's what's going on in this instance.
Right.
And it prevents them from having to wait for that laborious process to run its course, you know, to get that press release out into the wild.
Great. Thank you, Shel. I appreciate all your insights, and I think I can speak for everyone here that thanks you for coming here today and speaking to us as well.
Hey, I appreciate seeing you again, Eric.